what to do with all that energy from the last episode. We laughed, we cried, we flipped a table, we celebrated the death of one of America's most beloved presidents. Where do we go from here? Which is a question that Dr. King posed at the end of his life, and I hope that you read that in The Three Evils. Add that to your homework. In thinking about how to group these songs, one, I think it was interesting when we thought about direct action and getting pumped to actually do something. We both went to our respective punk rock corners. So when we talk about being punk rock kids, I probably cite that out of the need for cred a lot more than you do. But like ideologically, a lot of the touch points of punk that made us who we are reflected in here. We left some of the gnarliest stuff off, like Trap Them, but we don't have to get quite there. But in thinking about a framework for this, speaking of Killer Mike, his plot, plan, strategize, organize, mobilize refrain that has been picking up steam seemed like a good way. Like everything seemed to line up pretty neatly with that. So we got a batch of songs for plot, plan, and strategize are really like kind of one thing. It's like your Crouching Tiger moment. And then songs for organizing and really knowing what your demands are, and then mobilizing. And then ending on a note of another thing that Mike says all the time is like love and respect. Because there is a lot of uncomfortable tension and friction in getting people who don't want to change. So just remembering the end goal at the end of all this is beloved community, is peace and harmony, is getting to a place of loving thy neighbor as thyself. So I think 2 of the 3 songs in that last block were selected by you, and it's not a note that I would have thought to end on. I would have ended it with a big long middle finger in everybody's face. But again, that's counterproductive. And I think the goal is to like get as many people on board to the movement as possible. So,
well, I mean, we talk a big critical game about people who can't currently conceptualize the oppression that they are a part of. But at the end of the day, what we want is for people to take note that they're on the wrong side of that razor and flip over to the other side. Like, oh, okay, I need to correct something because I'm not the person I want to be. Yeah. Great. We welcome you.
And it doesn't mean you're a bad person. We're not indicting you. Like, please come with us.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be inviting you if we thought you were a bad person or you were beyond hope or whatever.
Yeah, we criticize each other like this.
Yeah. Yeah, you piece of shit.
I know. Pick better friends.
I think I had a show note in here that you called out on Slack and you were like, yeah, that's objectively wrong. I'm gonna just disagree with you on that if you say it out loud. That's what friends are for.
For sure. Yeah, this first group, solid batch. I definitely want to hit on a couple of these before we move into them. But again, at this point, just taking a lot of pride in our ability to put together even sub playlists that no one would ever conceptualize.
Yep.
And this one's a great one. Starting off with the first line in Awake from Trash Talk. In the land of Nod, he who sleeps with both eyes open is God. And just like, okay, that's me and you's starting point for life in general, is like ridiculously pervasive statements like that.
And musically, it drops in with the big drum beat and it feels like a skateboarder dropping in.
Yep.
And the video is awesome because it opens with like a provocative man on the street. And then it launches right into the song.
Yeah.
And it's a dude skateboarding around, like breaking shit, like actively antagonizing the world around him. Not even really to get a rise. The video is like actual anarchy, what it looks like. And musically it feels like that, where it's like you drop in and you're automatically going 60 miles an hour already. And you're like, your body's got to catch up to the G-force. And And so the lyrics are like almost the least of it.
Yep.
But if you're ready for action, you need to start at 60 miles an hour and get ready to run through a brick wall.
Yeah. I do love, though, that first phrase of in the land of Nod. So Nod is where Cain was exiled in the Bible after murdering Abel. And Nod is supposed to mean like being outside the presence of God. Or Augustine described it as carnal disquietude, which I think is like, it's a good...
Yeah, y'all didn't know y'all were getting that shit on here.
It's a good way to describe, I think, maybe the things that you and I have in common about what's the feeling of the shift once you're at the top of the ramp.
Yep.
You're like, okay, don't like. There's no need to dissect this statement too literally, but at the top of the ramp is there is no God. Go. Like. You know, like everything we were taught, believed all of this stuff, like these were abstractions that were neatly packaged to mean things or to get us to do things. Saying, when we talk about being...
White Jesus says, give us 10%.
White Jesus is a great example. Like when we talk about being godless, it's shirking the things that you were told that you need to believe about the world around you and saying, you know what? If there's a there, I'm going to start from scratch. I'll build this world myself. And until then, nothing else is worth trusting. Break.
Awake, 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 awake.
Yep.
I love the way it's like a caveman, you know. I mean, to me, it's like punk rock caveman, stay woke. And like stay woke has lost all of its teeth. But just be like, it's just a reminder you've meditated and you're centered and all that, but it's time to get awake, awake, awake. You know, like, come on, man, get out of bed. There's shit to do. Like we got to throw Molotovs into the prison industrial complex. This is what abolition is, man. Wake up, just crack a beer. Let's have fun. Speaking of godlessness, let's go into the next song.
Yeah. And speaking of too, that moment of like, and now you're awake, like, seeing The Truth Weighs Nothing by Gaza live when they were still a band was one of the most pointed moments of carnal disquietude I have ever experienced in my life. Because at that time, you know, the band is essentially the band Cult Leader now. They were in a band before. They had a vocalist who, for all appearances, seems to not have been a super great dude. But let's set that aside and just think of like the physicality of this standard looking band. No offense to Cult Leader, but then this dude was like 6'4", huge. And they're playing...
That's an imposing figure.
Ugh.
Yeah.
And nothing about his outward appearance or facial expression or demeanor indicated there's something redeeming about me. So it's just fear, which was perfect for a punk show because they were playing in Hell at the Masquerade. I've only ever seen a couple of shows at the Masquerade where or in Hell at the old Masquerade where it was already really small, but then like almost no one showed up for a particular show. And if you see the right band in that scenario, they're
terrified.
It's a prompt.
They occupy the whole space.
Yes.
And you really think like, this is going to be violent.
Yeah. So he spent most of this song down off the stage.
Gallows, Frank Carter did the same thing.
Yeah. But I mean, you kick off a song with, it sure was nice of Jesus to take time away from ignoring ethnic cleansing, genocide, and famine-bloated children, or regrowing limbs for landmine victims to help you score that touchdown. Ooh. Like, okay. But even like...
To help you find your keys, to help you land that promotion.
Yep.
It reminds me of the Amy Schumer skit where Bill Nye is like, the universe is not some concept that helps you live, laugh, love better, you stupid asshole. It has no motivation. It's an unfeeling thing. It's literally just atoms moving toward entropy and chaos. You mean nothing.
Yeah. Build the world from scratch. Start with what's actually true, right? And so it's a relatively short song, but like that's the thing that we drop into at the song. And then at the end of it, which is both effective live and on recording, when you're wrapping up with wake up, the truth weighs nothing, travel light, be unburdened. there's a whole bunch to dive into, I think, with that band and this record and all sorts of things if we wanted to.
A record called No Absolutes and Human Suffering, by the way.
But I mean, it is a pointed indictment of the raw laziness of organized religion in the face of massive oppression in the world around it. And I think, though, to translate this out of just direct punk anger, which it definitely is, actually the end of this reminded me of a quote that Ram Dass liked to bring out a lot, which is "Truth waits for eyes unclouded by longing," where in order to see the world around you, you have to stop expecting it or being attached to the world around you being the way that you want it to be,
Because
or not being the way
attachment
you
is
don't
suffering.
want it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in order for you to see things, you've got to empty things out and start from scratch. So that's, I think,
And that's the number one basic tenet of mindfulness and meditation, right? Is like living not awake is being in the river and letting the current push you wherever. Mindfulness is taking your eye to the side, to the riverbank, and saying, I can't control the flow of this river, but I can observe how it is. And that's a practice. That's a lifelong practice, because it transcends our natural instincts as wild animals trying to survive. Yeah. Also, there aren't a lot of places where the Venn diagram is a circle for us, but this record was produced by Kurt Ballou. We talked about Converge. And I, have half joked that the best heavy records of any given year or whatever's on Kurt's production discography that year, he finds a way, and he finds the bands and curates that like raw nerve heaviness where it feels like cold hits an exposed nerve. It's just voltage, and you touch your hand to it and you become a mutant, and you could throw a car through a plate glass window just with your own adrenaline strength. Like, that's what I love about Gaza and about this song, is it's just like, whoa, it's like Altered Beast a little bit, and you just completely level up and you're ready for the next thing. Which is Pete Seeger. You want to talk about the unions?
Let's take a sharp turn.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to take a little bit of a breather after a song like that. And this Seeger song is like the Bob Dylan song in that it's deceptive if you don't really listen to the words. Because it's sort of like, this song feels like Martin Luther stapling the things on the church door, the theses. It's a little bit like that. And, the anti-union bosses having something to say about that.
I do want to pick this apart just a minute for the purposes of really, I think, excavating the most important parts of this song and even the presentation of it, because I personally learned a lot, even just doing a basic bit of like, tell me a little bit more about, like, I know that this song came from someone else, so like, tell me about that story. So the songwriter was Florence Reese. Pete Seeger just popularized it. Also, Pete Seeger, I just want to acknowledge, has some pretty dubious history and has some pretty rough, late-breaking beliefs about Stalin and such. So, but what I want to do is like refocus this on where this song came from. He popularized it. He did a good job with it. That's fine, but we can set him aside a little bit and I think talk about this, because again, this brings up this moment of, okay, we've gone through Awake, we've gone through The Truth Weighs Nothing, which means, okay, I want to try to take reality as it comes to me. For me, even posing which side are you on was for a long time like a false choice. I don't need to pick sides. Binaries are unhelpful.
All lives matter.
Please don't attribute that to me necessarily.
I'm just saying you can see where that ideology can spin you out into that play. The hot, you put one foot in the hot tub of relativism, and before you get you have to like put some boundaries and some lines, or it's just everything all the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this is a perfect example of when we have the privilege of mentally abstracting the oppression of other people, we can imagine the scenario in which the oppression doesn't exist at all. So we can say things like, all lives matter, because we can envision this imaginary world in which everyone actually was treated equally. But the problem is, and that this is what was really helpful to me, was to really understand the story here, because this is a little bit more like the when they came for this group, I said nothing because I wasn't this group. And it's a little bit like, hold on, when someone asks you which side are you on, you don't have to pick a side until they come for you, because eventually there's a they. In oppression, there is an oppressive side, no matter what you want to do.
Generally,
right?
It's the rich.
That's right. And so like classic story, we're in the middle of the Great Depression. Like the song was written about, right? Throwback to where we are right now. So in the middle of the Great Depression, okay, so at a time where people can't find work, massive unemployment, all that stuff, right? So this is written about what's called the Harlan County War. Essentially, Harlan County coal coal owners and operators, in an effort to expand national dependency on their fuel, chose to sell below cost. Okay, so we're in the Great Depression. As a business owner, I need to make more money, which is, above board in America, no matter who it hurts, right? So
for a brief time, we created lots of shareholder value.
Oh, those things you love to say on your deathbed. So the business makes a choice. Okay, we've got to expand, right? We've got to do the freemium model, essentially, get a bunch of people on board. In order to do this, we need to sell below cost. Okay, so perfectly normal sounding business decision. So what happens? Same thing that happens with Reagan. How do we get money up to the rich people so that it trickles down? We take it from poor people. It always happens the same way. And so in 1931, the Harlan County Coal Operators Association cut miners' wages by 10%. Already impoverished people who work in extremely dangerous situations, who are having trouble making ends meet, right? And so
also with no employer-sponsored health insurance,
almost like that should never have happened to begin with.
Tight gig economy.
So the miners organize. We have to have some say in how we're treated because we don't have other options, right? And it's also really important to keep in mind the inability to move geographically was like really obvious at this time in history too. It's easy for us to theorize now. You can just go get a job in another place and move, despite the fact that it never works that way logistically. But like literally people are stuck living in a town where they live in order to work at the place that's nearby. And when they don't have enough money, there are no other options. And so they're organizing. And then what's starting to happen here in the song, when it pulls out and it says, they say in Harlan County, there are no neutrals here. You'll either be a Union man or a thug for J.H. Blair. Kyle, who was J.H. Blair?
Cliff, who was J.H. Blair?
He was a sheriff. It's the police. It's always the police somehow. So this was just a nice,
it's the rich. The police just do their bidding.
It hit me like a ton of bricks in a way where I was already expecting the song to hit me like a ton of bricks, to go into it and go, oh my God, it's the same story. Businesses make non-human decisions supported by government structure. The police enforce the business decisions because the businesses are supported by government structure. People die. Like, this is the story that gets told over and over again. And so all of that energy put into this song.
Sir, this is a conference on email marketing.
Oh, man. It's important, I think, to remember not only that these stories are cyclical, but they always seem to deal in this matter of someone chooses to be the they in a situation where there are sides. Just because it's easy to abstract it away doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So what happened was these miners are working already not making enough money, and then they become a side because their side had money taken away from people who had the ability to do so through the threat of violence via police. And so the sides come for you sometimes, and I think that as white dudes especially is a nuance that's worth putting into practice in reality. When we feel like people are choosing sides sometimes in, maybe they're over dramatizing it. Why are you making it about this? Right? And like I hear a lot of that right now with the Black Lives Matter protests. Like, I don't understand why you're making it about police and not black on black violence or something. No. Sides end up being chosen by the oppressors who put people in another box and say, you are now the oppressed. You've got to choose a side.
That's the wild thing to me about the whole thing is like the great marketing move of American society has been conditioning people to take the side of the people who already have all the power and don't need the help. Like, don't we love an underdog story? Weren't we founded by rebels? I mean, they wanted to be able to be their own slaveholders, and that's its own thing. But I just don't understand where we got so so disconnected from our own kind of like narrative arc in the whole thing. We're in season 9 of Scrubs or whatever the hell. America is a lot like Scrubs in that it probably never deserved to exist. I think there's an interesting thing that you said that kind of rolls over into the next song, which is "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised" by Scott-Heron. Is that one of those hard pills to swallow in adult life is realizing that it's not even most of the time active hatred for the other by the people in power. Yep. It's just a cynical, shitty, vested interest in the status quo. Yep. Things work for me. I don't care what the costs. I feel good. I want to continue to feel good.
Yeah. I'm not on a side.
Right.
I'm above the sides.
There are no sides.
Yeah, sides are for people who aren't as smart as me.
Right. We're all one human race in that I'm going to take the money from all humans. But this idea of the revolution will not be televised, it will be live, is like, of course, you're not nobody, the system is not going to encourage you to dissent or to be free or to have an American dream. The system wants you right where you are. Like, it's not broken. It's working the way that it's supposed to. So the idea that you got to tune out what is televised, what is kind of the monocultural ideal of the way things are, and the leave it to beaver existence. No, you got to get out. You got to turn off the TV. You got to go out there and be present in your real life. You got to step outside, start marching, and join the fight. Because what really needs to happen is counter to all of the messages that you're getting and you're receiving. The worst thing that you could do in the whole world is be complacent and sit still. And Gil was such an incredible he just turned words into just the rhythm of a Gil Scott-Heron song and poem is so incredible that it's like flubber bouncing around the room, it takes all of these thoughts and it makes them very visual and visceral. And he's such a great orator in that way too. This is one of my favorite songs, period. If I started a band, every time we went on tour, I would want to open with "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised" and just put a delay echo on live at the end of the song, just to remind people we're about to play some country music or whatever, but you're here for the real deal. Them Crooked Vultures, one of the best live bands we've ever seen, had that song Reptiles. And I'll never forget Josh Homme was like, you're all here tonight and this moment is all we have. And this is really special. And you're part of a club or whatever. This next song is about all the people out there, again, whose side are you on? The reptiles, the unfeeling, the cold, the people that want to atomize every part of your existence so that they can profit.
And I think it's worth taking the risk of reapplying the context of "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised" to now. I really want to encourage people. I know that it feels like you're doing important things when you watch a television pundit that you feel like you do or don't agree with. It feels like you're talking. I'm even talking about John Oliver at this point, although at least it's a little bit different from the network television where like, okay, this song is about the corporations are sponsoring things and it will never be the important things. Okay. If you're watching a talking TV pundit whose livelihood is based on commercials from corporations, there's a little bit of movement in there, sure. Like sometimes you can change advertising dollars. Ultimately, the revolution will not be televised there. It just won't. The system is the interconnectedness of corporations being able to build the economy the way that they want to. And when it drives your ability to talk about things and say things, the revolution will not be televised.
Yeah, it sets the agenda.
Yeah, turn it off and go talk to somebody else in real life who's not currently sponsored by Colgate or whatever, you know? I love the part where he's like, the revolution will not make your mouth have sex appeal. Like, I just love how weird commercials used to be, but it's such a good example now.
A white tiger, a white tornado, a white... Yeah. Yeah. Engelbert Humperdinck or whatever.
So sliding into the less nuanced portion of this block, I would say, like, we're going to go through Dead Prez, though. This record all day for me, all the time in general, although we chose the song Hip Hop here, which I personally love because I think it showcases some super early Run the Jewel vibes that people felt maybe came out of nowhere because there's so much Killer Mike and Jamie cadence here.
Wasn't there... was this the Chappelle Show theme, or it was an integral song to early Chappelle Show? That was certainly how I came across it. And then,
okay.
Dead Prez played the block party. And so that was how I came across it. My favorite part of the song is the part that they do a cappella in the middle. But,
yeah.
But you're right about the cadence being very Run the Jewels-esque.
Yeah. But this whole record is a good one for all the context we're talking about here.
It's called Let's Get Free, which I mean is like, it's so t-shirtable. They sell the t-shirt in the OK Player shop, but it's a good, if you need a refrain, a mantra to come back to for like doing the work. It's like, you know, let's free all of the oppressed peoples. And like, if you get to be free, why shouldn't other people? And not like free to do free enterprise, but like free to not live in poverty and oppression their whole life. And somewhat to that point, my favorite, you know, the whole second verse, I guess, is like MCs get a little bit of love and think they hot. Talk about how much money they got. All your records sound the same. Same scenes in the video, monotonous material. But he says, would you rather have a Lexus or justice, a dream or some substance, a Beamer, a necklace, or freedom? And again, in context, thinking about how that cut against primetime, hyper-materialist hip-hop. Like, hip-hop was absolutely as capitalistic as it could have possibly been. Like, that was the era of Big Timers and the Pen and Pixel Diamond album covers and Number One Stunna and, like, all of that sort. It was a little later than all that, but it was, like, in the shadows of all that. Coming up around the same time as College Dropout when... You know, it's funny to talk about Kanye in that context now, but like,
it was earnest then.
Arguably sort of earnest anti-capitalism or just like questioning what is this all for? That's not really necessarily our agenda. That comes from a sort of place of outside influence. This song cuts through that with a great deal of intensity.
Yeah. And I also feel it's worth mentioning, since I'm going to attempt to touch on every possible social topic within the scope of 2 episodes here. Woo. Hey.
We got to get it out of our system a little bit.
Totally. I mean, the lyrics you just pulled out are also a great example of a lot of the bullshit I'm hearing too about like, well, hey, why doesn't the Black community address violence within its own community? Like, if you're unaware of the way that the Black community has been able to critique itself over time, it's because you haven't asked any questions. There are tons of organizations doing it, right? Even if you just talk about violence, tons of organizations, tons of activists, tons of people who have been yelling about that same thing.
Also doing that work in spite of being actively destabilized consistently generation after generation.
Exactly.
On an ongoing basis. Like
Yeah.
in the 80s, trying to prop up their communities, even though there's a combination of crack being flooded in by the actual government of our country, and then the tax dollars and revenue from the cities. You know, there's a very recent city council meeting where there's a guy in a mask talking about how most of the cops aren't policing their own neighborhoods. They're physically taking the tax dollars from their salary. They're taking the tax base away back to the suburbs, so that reinforces inequality. All of that plays a role. And yet we have the audacity to be like, quit fighting amongst yourselves. Like quit not being exactly perfect when we're actively ruining your lives.
Right. Yeah.
Why are you hitting yourself, bro? Why are you hitting yourself?
Oh, it feels like that. But like this is just such a straightforward, direct example of the countless times in hip hop where the hip hop community critiqued itself. Hey, it's great that you got the money. It's great that you made your fortune. It's great that you're popular. It's good. That's hard to come by. All that stuff is fine. Don't forget about the bigger points. And there's plenty of critique. So I felt like calling that one out at the very least before we get to the least nuanced band that's ever existed, which is sort of their point.
But apparently still too nuanced for a lot of their current fans. Did you know that Rage Against the Machine was a political band? I'm very offended to have learned that.
I believe that is a fake meme. I don't believe anyone feels
it's a
that.
psyop.
Russ is over there like, I've got an idea. What if we questioned what Rage Against the Machine meant? Totally.
Rage Against the Machine, just party band with heavy guitar.
You earned it, entire country.
So we covered the record that this was on, and we literally made the T-shirt because specifically I wanted this refrain on a T-shirt because I needed to keep this in mind for myself. Like, we've been winding ourselves up a lot over the course of these 2 episodes. And we have so much more to go in this one. But, you know, in addition to the verses of, for example, what does the billboard say? Come and play, forget about the movement. He whispers it on the record, but he yells it live. He says, your anger is a gift. And I think reframing it in your mind that way and remembering, like, you are awake, you are aware now, like, you have to do something, you have the energy, you have to do something with it. And that's why I would choose this song probably over other Rage songs, because it reminds you, like, the idea of freedom and the American dream is sort of a farce. It's sort of a marketing message. Freedom, yeah, right. But if that makes you angry that it's a farce, you remember to use that like a gift. Like, what an opportunity to be living in this moment and to be able to change the course of history for the better, rather than doing nothing and being on your deathbed and having your grandparents ask you, like, what'd you do about climate change? Nothing. I ate a lot of beef. Had a real good time. All of these blocks remind me of that Carlin bit. One of my favorite stand-ups of all time was Carlin's Life is Worth Losing. And right around the middle of that, he does a long bit about how dumb Americans are, and apologies if that offends you, I guess, but he punctuates that bit by saying it's called the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it. So it starts with a song called Awake, and I think it's really about, like, the plot plan and strategize is to wake yourself up and to wake up the others around you and to find co-conspirators, John Brown style, who are ready to, like, raid on Harper's Ferry and, like, do the damn thing.